Welcome back to CannaWeek, brought to you by New Frontier Data, where we deliver the week's top headlines in cannabis and hear experts weigh in on the impacts these stories are having on the industry. I'm your host, Heather Wickline. Our first guest has been a Protis Global team member for over 20 years and has since helped companies in the adult consumable space scale and optimize via people solutions. He's an avid speaker at large national cannabis conferences and hosts a cannabis industry-focused podcast called Plant Profits. Please welcome Vern Davis. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Heather. How are you?
I'm doing well.
This is great.
Thank you. And our next guest is a visionary thought leader in the industry. He runs our very talented research team here at New Frontier Data. Please welcome our Chief Knowledge Officer, John Kagita. Thank you so much. Welcome back, John.
It's a pleasure to be back, Heather. Thanks so very much.
I love having you. Before we get started, Vern, would you mind giving a brief description of Protis Global for our listeners who may not be familiar with your company?
Protis Global is a people solutions business. We have engaged search, interim contract staffing, board appointments, employer branding, data and talent analytics, outplacement services, anything that really deals with an entity about the people and the movement of the people. That's where we work.
Got it. Well, I'm excited to hear your insights because we're going to be talking a lot about employment and jobs right now. So let's dive right in. Politico reported cannabis employees are in high demand during economic crash. So the question on whether the cannabis industry is recession-proof has been a hot topic as we're all trying to weather the storm of uncertainty. Some operators find themselves with the goal of just surviving this, while others are either conducting business as usual or expanding their business and hiring employees. We know this is only possible because dispensaries have been deemed essential and able to continue operations. In this article, they mentioned Greenleaf Medical is in the process of hiring roughly 300 workers for cultivation and retail operations in Virginia and Maryland. Trulieve has added 250 retail workers in Florida since COVID-19 outbreak. And Cresco Labs is hiring 250 workers to staff its stores in Illinois. So in a time where we have 40 million plus unemployed, the cannabis industry has definitely given some optimism for people searching for work. Vern, how have you seen, in your experience, have you seen the industry respond to this recent wave of candidates?
Yeah, so before the pandemic, right, the cannabis industry was going through this big change already, right? So about a year ago, it all started to where the PowerPoint companies had to become the EBITDA companies. And that was very important when it came to talent acquisition, and the talent supply. And that transition has created a very interesting wave. So now during the pandemic, you are seeing the companies that are focused on flower and edibles, there is a spike. The companies that are in the direct relationship to the demand, meaning there's a growth in the number of dispensaries. MSOs are opening more and more dispensaries. There's more legislation that's providing for states, other states to get online, like Chicago or Illinois got online in January, and some others. That creates an opportunity. So you're going to see spikes at the dispensary level, and because of the demand for more, you're going to see spikes in the cultivation level, and we are seeing that. But I will tell you that it's quite interesting how it's affecting the companies based on the time when they engage the marketplace and the size of their business. I think there's some real interesting dynamics that are going on. The very large companies, like Canopy and others, are at this time they're scaling back. They're trimming. They're furloughing workers, right? They're letting folks go. They're getting their right sizing, their business, and I think that's important to note. Now, I have some relationships in the business, obviously, because that's what we do, and you know, companies independently owned, maybe a little bit smaller, like Ball Family Farms in LA, right? Chris Ball and his company. They curate these amazing flower products, his business is up 50, 60%, right? So, or Curaleaf in the medical field, their business is doing well, and they're expanding their business in different markets. So it varies on how you and when you arrived in the space and where you are about how this is affecting the talent acquisition part of your business.
Got it. John, what's your take on that? Do you feel like do you see more of the smaller companies kind of being able to expand and the massive companies kind of having to pull back a little bit more?
So we definitely see a number of convergent kind of tracks happening in this moment. To Vern's point, absolutely seeing huge opportunity for business expansion at a time that most of the rest of the economy is contracting, particularly amongst the companies that have really dialed in where within the supply chain that they're operating and have developed really effective approaches by which to execute and deliver. So the companies that are performing well, which are no longer PowerPoint companies, which are revenue-driven, growth-oriented, I think have a really unique moment to capture, because with cannabis business being declared essential, they've had the ability and opportunity to grow, particularly during this moment where we're seeing really high demand growth from consumers. But I think there's also a broader kind of dynamic that's been happening in this space. If you look at the way the investment climate contracted in 2019, as investors went from having a lot of irrational exuberance around how this industry was going to grow, to really starting to look very strong and long and hard at how businesses that looked good on paper were actually going to get to profitability. It meant that there was this shift that began to happen where the businesses that were recruiting were really now much more focused on finding people who could execute and deliver. So this idea of the professionalization of the cannabis industry and the urgency around that, particularly as these very, very large companies, which have been kind of fueled by an investor capital, and those investors are now looking at those businesses being self-sustaining, being revenue and profit generating, has meant that there's been this focus on trying to find the best and brightest who can transition these businesses from a venture-driven growth model to a revenue and sustainable revenue driven approach. And that, I think, has also led to some of the new hires that these businesses are trying to bring on. So smaller companies you're seeing this growth amongst, let's call them smaller companies, who are bringing in staff to capture this business growth opportunity, whether that's on the retail side, whether that's on the cultivation side. But also at the senior level, the executive level, I think there's an opportunity that we're seeing to bring in from the rest of the economy, people who have kind of track records for implementation, execution, growth, particularly in early stage markets, as investors are starting to apply quite a bit more pressure in getting these businesses to be to have sustainable revenue streams, sustainable profitability.
Well, okay, so taking that a little bit further, so you're saying that there's a lot more of like a professional C-level suite people are looking for. Vern, what would you say as far as like what areas of expertise do you see like being most needed as far as people looking at candidates?
Well, it's very clearly the consumer products area is a very important part of what the companies are looking for. Right now, if you take a look at what, you take what John said, right? And he kind of echoed what I said, is that the ability to build a profitable company and that you can sustain profitability is important. People looking for now money, okay, that's important. Team or talent is important. The idea is important. And there's going to be also a move to brand. Because in a consumer-driven, consumable business, brands are important and they are valuable, and that will happen, and it's already starting to happen in the cannabis space. But yeah, so if you take a look at our business again, when I take a look at this, I really look at it from a mirror. Adult consumables and highly regulated businesses and professionals. that comes from adult beverage businesses and other businesses that are slightly related or deeply related based on route to market, government regulations, stipulations. Companies are looking for professionals in the C-suite and frontline leaders who have experience in those areas so that they can take that and transfer that learning to the cannabis industry. And that's happening. That's a demand that we get when we get an opportunity to work with a cannabis company, a well-run cannabis company that understands what it takes to be profitable and is building their company that way. The people matter, the talent matters, and where they come from matters, their experience matters. Now, on the other side of that, I would say it makes it very difficult because these professionals that are coming from some established sectors of consumables are finding out that that building this business without necessarily a clear roadmap is absolutely the most difficult thing they've done.
Would they consider it like a risk, do you think, or?
Yeah, it is a risk.
Moving into this? Mm-hmm.
It is a risk, and that's why I say it always goes back to, they're investigating the money, the idea, the team, the leadership, the board of directors, the viability of how this particular company is playing in its specific space. That is really important as I see potential candidates think about and consider going from a safe, established business where we know all the rules to one where the rules are being created and made up as we go along and changed often. And not enough change has happened in some rules that have already been laid down. So that is a very difficult scenario to be in. So for these cannabis companies to get the talent, I think it's better now than it was a year ago, because what John talked about, right? There's been a weeding out process of companies. And now you can start to see what is important to these companies and what they're looking for and how they're looking at their business. And you can now go dive into them and really find out really good information, because some of them are going to be strategic acquirers in the business. And, as this industry evolves and becomes a real industry and a player, you're going to find the players, right? And what you have to do now as a talent is to really find a way to evaluate the surface and go beneath the surface to understand, is this entity going to make it in this particular game? And that's an important way. And you doing it by yourself, I don't think is a good idea.
John, any follow-up or thoughts to that?
Two thoughts. One, about this idea of coming into the cannabis industry being a risk. There's no question about that. I've spent a lot of time talking to executives who are thinking about making the transition or wondering whether this is an industry in which they can parlay their skill. And, even speaking from my own experience 6 years in, I thought I was working hard before I came to cannabis. I've never worked as hard as I have 6 years.
John, I hear that all the time.
Yeah. The scale of the challenge is because you are coming to a system where not only has the rule book not been written, but you're building the plane as you're flying it. And it would be one thing being a startup in an established industry, but being a startup in a startup industry in a startup economy is a scale. And like most of us who come from established sectors, well-regulated or well kind of oriented, well-oiled machines, is initially quite disorienting. But it's also, I think that's one of the things that has been such a motivator, such a passion driver for a lot of the executives to come into the space. The fact that you have carte blanche, the fact that you can throw spaghetti against a wall and see what sticks, the fact that you can try things in this space that you probably would never have been able to try in a different type of environment. And the fact that it is such a dynamic environment that you have the ability, the opportunity, the latitude, and almost the imperative to continue to iterate, that nothing you build now is set in stone, I think is part of the reason why, I can speak for myself. This unlike other roles which you can leave work at the office, here you can't really turn your brain off. Like there's a level of excitement about about the challenges that the work represents, that I think for many of the executives who make the transition has been a major offset for the security that and stability that we've had in other environments. So is there a risk? Absolutely. But I think the challenge of the work, the ability to be creative and innovative in a way that few other sectors give us the latitude to be, and the ability to build something from the ground up with some of the most passionate, some of the most talented people I've ever had the privilege of working with, has been a more than ample counterweight to the risk that coming to this space has represented.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I just want to follow up on this. I think what I hear most often is that folks want to really leave their fingerprint somewhere in their career, and this opportunity could be the last time you get a chance to do that, and maybe you haven't had a real chance to do that yet. And this gives them an opportunity to leave their fingerprints on an industry. And if you really believe you want to, dig the ditches and do the trailblazing, you will not be disappointed, John. Am I correct? You won't be disappointed.
No question about that.
All right. Well, so for our listeners, come over to the cannabis industry. It's super fun and exciting, and you'll have to work your butt off, but it's great.
Get some rest before you do. But
think through it. Consult. Yeah.
Well, moving on, the Daily Star reported on a study that found New York has 2,941 legal cannabis industry jobs. So according to the study, at the beginning of 2020, nationwide, the legal cannabis industry supports the equivalent of 243,700 full-time jobs. So it's been reported that cannabis-related jobs are growing faster than any other industry in the U.S. Vern, I want to start with you. What advantages do you think the cannabis industry offers to professionals that other industries might not offer?
Yeah, I think we mentioned some of them. I think we mentioned some of them, right? The opportunity to do some things that you never had a chance to do. The opportunity to really, at the core, be entrepreneurial, right, in your everyday activity, because you are making stuff up sometimes. and I think that gets, but also you have an opportunity to connect with, depending on where you are in an organization, connect with the financial means of the organization and where the finances are coming from, to interact with the markets, to really be part of the board, interact with the board on an ongoing basis, or be on the board of an entity that you may never have had the opportunity, where you work for and you're on the board of directors. So I think there's some unique challenges, some unique opportunities. And I also believe that everyone can't do it. Great folks, really talented folks, I have seen them fail in the first 3 or 4 months of being part of the cannabis industry, and they're amazing professionals. But as John said earlier, you've never worked so hard. And there's nothing, I mean, you are really, you're making it up as you go, and someone who's influencing you, or some entity that's influenced you, is also making it up as they go. And that makes it a very difficult scenario to survive and thrive in, but it's exciting to the right person. It's exciting to the right person, and they want to conquer that. And I tell you, on the other side, I'll reimagine some things for you. On the other side of that, someone in my profession and the executive search business, that's going to be attractive down the road in those careers, that they actually did that. And that is going to really be helpful for them to continue their careers they wish to, ongoing. This is some of the best experiences that you can get in the workforce right now, is in the cannabis space. Some of the most richest experiences you can get.
So if you know someone that was in the cannabis industry and then left, you know they're a grinder and a hard worker if they survived.
Yeah.
You say, I have just the job for you.
Yeah, and slightly smart. Absolutely.
Yeah. John, what would you say? Can you find any other advantages, besides the great challenge it offers, but any other advantages for professionals that this industry offers that may not have that same opportunity in other industries?
So I think creative latitude is a really important one. It's not to suggest that if you're coming to cannabis, you will only work on the things that you quote unquote enjoy doing. This is a chief cooks and bottle washers type of environment. So in most organizations that are coming to cannabis, you'll be playing a role in, particularly at the executive level, you'll be involved in things both high and low. That said, and my experience, I think, is testament to this. I used to teach a course in career management strategies, and I always used to tell my students that one of the things, it's just as important to know what it is you don't want to do as it is to know what it is you do want to do. And if you can come into the cannabis industry with an orientation, a good understanding of both where your skill sets lie as well as what you're passionate about. The industry is still both so young and organic that you can build that as a referential framework in a way that I just don't think you get to do in many other sectors of the economy. And that allows you, I think, to really allow this to become a passion-driven role as opposed to one where you're just checking the boxes. So creative latitude, I think, has been one of the things that for those who've come in with that orientation, been able to do to amplify the passion in their work. And that's, I think, been a source of additional kind of value in making this transition. Second is kind of the whether it's social cause or corporate social responsibility component to this. We know a lot of executives, a lot of people who are in the industry who came in, whether because they felt really passionately about, say, medical cannabis, knew somebody in their ecosystem, friends, family members who positively benefited from it, and for that was a driving motivation for them to get involved, or they came in from the social justice side, coming in because they felt that there was inequity in cannabis prohibition and wanted to help through their role in professionalizing this industry, address some of these inequities in the way cannabis prohibition has been enforced. There's a lot of social components to what has motivated people to participate in cannabis that I think has given them the ability to be involved in the corporate social responsibility or personal social responsibility aspects to their work in a way that most corporate entities don't allow with the latitude that you tend to find in cannabis organizations, and I think that's been another piece of it. For me, third has been the ability to build a team par excellence. Some of the perks that you can give in cannabis, you just can't do in corporate. I've been able to have a team that can work from anywhere in the world, whenever they want to work. We accommodate their schedules, we give them great flexibility. And through the ability to do that, not only do I feel like I've been able to recruit some of the most talented, capable analysts I've ever had the privilege of working with, but also giving them an environment in which they've had the ability to do their best work. And so, having that latitude, I think, has been, a great asset in cannabis. And for my teams, it meant I've had on any given day people working from the top of Colorado's mountains to beaches in Tahiti. And they're still delivering excellence. So just some of the perks that I think come with being in a space that is young, entrepreneurial, and gives its stakeholders broad latitude to build the ship as they fly.
It's so true. I mean, I feel like, John, you and I have spoken to so many people that they really have a personal story of how they got into the cannabis industry, whether it be they have a family member who, was a cancer patient or someone suffering from PTSD, and they've seen such benefits and they really wanted to make a difference. It's very unique industry for that reason, just that reason alone. But we're almost out of time. But before we say goodbye, Vern, John, any parting words for our listeners?
So the cannabis industry, the legal cannabis industry, has already generated over 250,000 jobs, and that's just within the states where it's currently legal. Based on our analysis, if cannabis were to be legal nationally, the industry would create well over 1 million jobs, and those are principally focused in plant-touching businesses, or immediate supply chain sectors, not including all of the ancillary jobs that could be created through the downstream income from this industry. the point here is this. At a time when you've had 40 million people lose their jobs because of this COVID pandemic, at a time when the economic downturn has been catastrophic to many state and local government budgets, I think there's going to be, I think cannabis presents a real opportunity to talk about catalyzing a new sector of the economy that does not detract from other sectors of the economy. Rather, this is about transitioning an illicit market into a regulated, legal one. And so as our lawmakers, our policymakers try to identify ways to catalyze new growth, drive new investment, create new jobs, we think there's a really important role that cannabis can play as part of a broader economic development program here that I think will present a very significant opportunity for legal market expansion, not just domestically, but internationally in the months and years ahead.
Vern, anything to add?
Sure. I think that the cannabis industry has created another avenue, another opportunity for women and other minorities for board opportunities in the space. And it also has created a real sense of social equity. And people are rallying around that, and they've been rallying around that for a while in the space. And I think that is very important. Having said that, I think there's a gap. And the gap is the opportunity for the formal market to learn from the informal market of the cannabis. Now, I don't really necessarily know exactly how you do that, but I know that there's a lot of knowledge. There's an industry being built formally, legally. There's an industry that's existed for decades informally. And there's a lot of knowledge on both sides and at different spaces and different levels and at a different pace. And I think that the sharing of information and sharing of knowledge and learning can make this a better industry for the consumer. So and the investor and the talent that wants to go there. So I'm looking forward to all of those things coming together.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us at CannaWeek. To our listeners, please be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast. You can find these stories we covered and more on New Frontier Data's Cannabis Insights Daily, and you can subscribe on our websites. Thank you again to our guests and our listeners. I'm your host, Heather Wickline. I will see you next time.